Services, and I am so happy to be here tonight to talk about your fifth graders transitioning to middle school. As families were walking in, I've been in district so long, I was realizing some families I've known since their child was 3 years old, and to think about them going to middle school is crazy. So I'm sure that's how you're feeling too, is how could this be my baby going to middle school? So we are here to really talk about what supports and services are available for your student, your child who has an IEP here in District 25. So as you'll see, there's a lot of team members here. Each one of us will share a little bit of information, whether it's from the administration, with the teachers, speech pathologists, social workers. We'll each introduce ourselves and share a little bit of information regarding what the transition is like and what supports and services are available. So we'll talk a little bit about the transition process from the student perspective, what they will be going through, from the staff perspective, how they share information, from the parents and guardians, kind of what your role in all of this will be. We'll discuss, like I said, the middle school special education supports, what those different classes or therapies would look like in the middle school schedule, meet some of the South and Thomas team. There's some from each building here. Like I said, all those administrators, teachers, team members, and coordinators. My role, as I shared, is just overall helping all the teams make sure that we're providing supports and services at both buildings, and then directing the teams to make those relationships with you. At the end, we'll have some time if you have any questions, especially for the administrators. We're happy to answer those too. So we're going to just jump right in and get started with the transition process for students. I'll introduce Lori Namowitz. She's our principal here at Thomas Middle School.
Hello and welcome. It is so fun to have all of you here tonight with this opportunity to talk to you guys about the transition process. Please make yourselves comfortable. If you don't have a seat yet, these couches over here are available. We'll try and talk nice and loud, but if at any point you can't hear us, just kind of give us a little thumbs up. And if you have a question throughout the presentation too, don't be afraid to just raise your hand. We're happy to answer those questions as well. The first thing that we're going to chat about is the transition process for the students. It's really quite a detailed process. We really want to make sure that students are feeling comfortable and they know what to expect when they get to the middle school level. So this coming April, all of the students, whether it's South or Thomas, will take a trip over to their middle school. They'll have a chance to meet their administrators. At each of the buildings, we have a principal and 2 associate principals, so they'll get to meet all of us administrators when they come over. They'll get a chance to meet other students that are currently enrolled in middle school, and then they'll take a building tour to make their way around the building and kind of get familiarized with the building. I'm curious, in the crowd here tonight, do we have any first-timers? Your oldest child who's coming next year is a 5th grader. Any first-timers? Okay, great. I would assume that the rest of you know this drill, but you came anyways to learn about it, so that's great. But it is nice when the 5th graders come over and there are older student leaders that can show them around the building and help them feel comfortable. We'll also have an opportunity with the students to review our website. If you go on either one of our websites, you can learn so much about the current programming that we have. You might find a tab that says Welcome to Middle School, or another good tab to look at is the morning announcements. There's so much that your students can learn from just going through each of our websites. Your students will also have the opportunity, if appropriate, to attend their IEP meeting. There will be an IEP transition meeting with members of the team from the middle school, as well as current members of your child's team. And if it's appropriate for your child, they'll be included in the meeting as well. And then in August, we will have an orientation date. So each building runs an orientation specifically for 6th graders. Another opportunity for them to come in the building, really make their way around. Do you have student leaders that attend your orientation that help out? So there's other students, current middle schoolers, 7th and 8th graders, that will be there to give them tours and things like that at orientation. We also do some locker setup time, so students can come in before school starts to set up their lockers. And then the big first day of school is August 17th. And I know here at Thomas we do a partner piece where we have 6th graders working with 8th graders on that first day when they get their schedule to make their way around. Whereas at South they get their schedules
in end of July.
End of July, so they have a little sense of where they're going ahead of time. So that's the student lens. All right, let's talk a little bit about the transition process for our staff. We do a lot of articulation, a lot of communication between the 6th grade teachers and the 5th grade teachers. For example, just yesterday, we had 9 staff members from the elementary level come over to Thomas for breakfast, and we went through our continuum of supports for our students here in 6th grade. So there's a lot of communication that goes back and forth between the 2 groups. There's a lot of coordination there. We as a 6th grade team will review the IEP very carefully, we'll ask questions. We do those IEP transition meetings with you, and at that time, we may make some revisions that are appropriate for our school, middle school setting, and of course, you'll be a team member in that process as we talk through it. We'll try and share as much information with you as we can. You may leave here tonight with some additional questions. At those meetings is a great time to ask those questions. If you wanted to, and if middle school teachers wanted to and vice versa, we can observe each other. So we have already had some staff that have gone over to our elementary buildings to observe your students and check out what the program in there looks like. Every year it changes just a little bit, so it's always nice to see your 5th graders in their environment that they've gotten used to this whole school year. And likewise, 6th grade teachers or 5th grade teachers can come here and check out our different programs as well. We really want to prepare our new students, so we do a lot of that articulation. And again, for staff, we have several staff that come in and help us out with our orientation. And then, of course, on that first day of school, your child will get to meet their case manager. In some cases, they can meet their case manager ahead of time because they're in your transition meetings. It just depends. All right, the transition timeline for parents. This is really step 1 for all of you, and great job. You're getting all of this information. You'll then have a chance to attend a building level meeting. So each of us does a presentation where it's for all incoming 6th grade parents. I don't know if any Thomas folks checked their email, but about an hour ago I sent out the big email that tells you the dates of the parent presentation. At Thomas, we do it twice. We do it during the day via Zoom, just for convenience, and then we do it in the evening. Come twice if you want to hear the information twice. And in the evening time, we do have some parent tours that we do. I forget how your presentation is. Is it via Zoom?
Yeah, we do that. We do a Zoom in the morning and then an open meeting.
Same format. So, and that's another time where you can ask a lot of questions. We'll share a presentation that isn't as specific as tonight is to special education programming. Let's see here. Please ask questions throughout the process. When we do our student orientation for 6th graders, there is a time that parents can come in with their child if you wanted to and set up their locker and get a feel for the building before school starts. But we're a little bit different than South in that we don't share the child's schedule ahead of time, we only share the homeroom. But you will get a chance to set up your locker at that time with your student if you wanted to. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jim Morrison, the principal at South Middle School.
Thank you, Lori. Hello, everybody. Great to see everyone here. I get the luxury of talking about the school day and what your child gets to experience for the 3 years over at South or Thomas. It's very exciting. The transition process, it can be a little nerve-wracking for students at first, but I think, as Lori was saying, we do a lot beforehand to try to create that transition so students coming in are feeling comfortable at being able to get in. We take some time at the beginning of the school, the first day, to make sure that kids are organized and get their materials together, and then make sure they know where to go throughout the day. Our schedule and our setup is quite a bit different than elementary. We start earlier. We start at 7:50. But we also end earlier at 2:45. It's a 10-period school day, which the first period is what we call at South home base, and at Thomas it is homeroom. Ours is different in the sense that we have one teacher for 12 to 16 students in the home base. At Thomas they have 2 teachers with 22 to 28 students in their home base. But the home base is basically the same thing. Kids come in, attendance is taken, announcements are given, they work on executive functioning skills of making sure their locker doesn't explode every day. It's funny, in the morning it's beautiful, at the end of the day it explodes, so it's crazy. But they also work on social emotional learning during that time. Home base and homeroom, the kids really get to connect with a teacher. It's kind of the go-to person. It's the person who takes them to assemblies, when they go on field trips, they go with their home base or their home group. So it's kind of that, it really builds a great community feel during that 17-minute time. Then there's 9 40-minute class periods where kids they go to PE every day, they have their academics, lunch, and then they have creative arts. And our creative arts is a bit different than elementary in the sense that in 6th grade, they get a taste of all of our creative arts. So in 6-week periods, they go from one creative arts to the next, which is they are music, art, STEM, drama, communication media arts, which is CMA, and digital arts and design, which is DAD. And so they get about 6 weeks of each of these creative arts. And then in turn, when they get to 7th and 8th grade, they get choices and are able to kind of find their track of what they love to do. And I think that's about it for the day.
Yeah.
We're very excited to, kids come in and that first day, people are directing, signs up, people are marching them around. But it's great because kids, we don't form a line and walk down the hallway. It's a bit chaotic, as you can see, but kids learn to walk on the left and walk, right and left and as they go through. So it takes probably about 7 days and pretty much they're in and go. So, and our teachers know that, and our teachers work with our kids to make sure they're comfortable as they go through. So now I'd like to introduce Dean Albert, who's South's Student Services Coordinator.
Hi, it's so nice to see some familiar faces, a lot of new faces. As Dr. Morrison said, I serve as the Student Services Coordinator at South Middle School. I also serve as the coordinator for Dryden Elementary, so I know some of you there, and I've been at many of the elementary schools, so lovely to see some of our Northside families as well. The continuum of services in District 25 is something many of you might be familiar with. Others, this might be something you haven't seen in a while. And really what we want to kind of show you and remind you of is that we have a number of services. This reflects the least restrictive environment, that LRE. And what we're looking at is always trying to maintain our students in the least restrictive environment possible, given the needs, the supports that they require per their IEP. So at the top, general education, which could include some of those tiered intervention supports, would be the least restrictive. All the way down to the very bottom, which is home and hospital services. Students typically fall somewhere kind of in the middle there, students with IEPs. In middle school, we offer classes that you'll hear more about that might be co-taught in the general education classroom. So a resource teacher might go in and teach alongside a gen ed teacher. There might be classes that are just taught by a resource teacher. And those are all housed in the schools themselves. We also house instructional programs, which you'll hear more about from our instructional team. And then we also provide the resource, the services, the support services, related services, like speech and social work, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and such. So in that continuum of services, our goal is always to keep the students in the least restrictive environment possible while meeting their needs. So we're going to hear more, as I said, about some of these, but I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Hammer, and she is Thomas coordinator.
Good evening, I almost said afternoon. Good evening. I'm Lauren Hammer. I'm the coordinator for services here at Thomas Middle School. And what this slide is demonstrating are the programs that we're going to walk through tonight. We kind of chunked them into 3 different categories. Those that fall under what we call our resource program, which are the co-taught classes, the small group class, and the resource class that's offered at both schools. And then there's our instructional programs, which are our extended resource program, which we refer to as ERP, and the individualized learning program, which we refer to as ILP. The final category that we'll walk through tonight to describe are the related services. So that's the services such as speech, occupational therapy, that the students may have. Thanks for being here. Now I'll pass it on to you, Matt Rayberger, one of our special teachers here at Thomas.
Good evening. It is nice to see some familiar faces and welcome to the new families that will be joining either South or Thomas Middle School. So just speaking a little bit about our resource program. So the resource program is a level of support where you might have students who receive small group special education along with general education classes, In their general education classes, they might have co-taught support, so where we would have a special education teacher alongside the general education teacher teaching. The resource program might also look like where it's a general education classroom with a shared teaching assistant. Some students might just all be in all general education classes without a shared teaching assistant, but they might have a resource class, and I'll talk about that in a second, because the resource class is different than the resource program. So just, talking about like a student profile here, they would understand the general education curriculum, they might need some accommodations or modifications, require some access to a special education teacher, whether again it's in the co-taught classes or in that resource class period. And within that resource class period, they might look like a student who's working on executive functioning skills or social emotional or behavioral skills related to their IEP programming. And then we know that throughout the year, students' needs vary. So we might have a meeting where we might be making a change to student schedule, where they might require more services within a small group program. But typically the small group programs that we have for the resource program would be in math and in ELA. And in math, you've got it might be a direct instruction program, or it might be what we call like a parallel math program, which is small group math, but at a slower pace than the general education curriculum. And again, it's really determined on a student's need. The small group classes are taught by a special education teacher. And I think Deanna's here to share a little bit about that too.
Yeah. I'm Deanna Nabar. I'm one of the resource teachers at South Middle School. So you're going to hear the word resource a lot, and it gets confusing for parents in the sense that you have the big umbrella term of resource because that's similar to what you're used to with your students at elementary. That's the program that they're in because of based on their needs, based on their individual education plan. When they come to middle school, they can have resource services in that co-taught setting, or they could also have it within that small group setting. So when they get their schedules, students and parents are often confused because they'll say, I see a resource math class, I see a resource ELA class, and I see this other class that just says resource. So that, depending on what their needs are, that could be because they need alternative curriculum in that math or alternative curriculum in that ELA in that small group setting. So they're receiving their services where they need them, but just so that you're not confused when you hear that word resource. If they're in the co-taught class, they're still getting those services in that classroom. So when they're in that small group resource setting, we have to give a label for the way that they categorize them in the computer for their schedules. And so that's kind of where that comes from. But students can have, in middle school, we have a block schedule. So they have their ELA curriculum as a block that's 2 classes that they would have that same core teacher for both of those, whether they're in the gen ed with that same special ed teacher and that gen ed teacher, or whether they're in that small group ELA class, and they would have both their reading and then their writing within that ELA block. And that would have that same, again, they try to pair them where they're close together, but they might have a different class in between, but they would have that same teacher for those skills. And then that writing, so some of your students get different writing in elementary. That writing is built in within that ELA curriculum in the writing in middle school. Sometimes students can also have additional small group reading classes or small group math classes or writing classes if they need extra individual in a different curriculum as well. And that would be in place of either a science or social studies class, because within those 10 periods we have to look at what is their needs and what we pull out of that core curriculum to replace to meet those minutes for them. So some of you that have students that have double reading or double math, that's where that would be in place of, and that would be replacing the science or the social studies. And that would be part of your transition process when you would be part of that team to make those decisions. It's really based on everybody's individual needs, and it goes at their pace, and like Yvette said, that as needs arise, it's a continuum, so we're constantly reading and making changes as needed if they need a more restrictive or least restrictive or in the gen ed or out of the gen ed. So it isn't just a status quo stagnant place to stay.
And then we do have that other resource period, which I was a little confused as coming from 5th grade to 6th grade too and being part of the whole district. So Yvette does a nice job describing what that resource period is about.
Okay, so the resource period would be a time for students to be working on, again, based on their IEP needs. It might be some executive functioning needs. It It might be working on some social emotional needs, working on some behavioral needs, and working, of course, on academic needs. We might be doing some pre-teaching of material, pre-teaching of vocabulary there, re-teaching of information as well. Test preparation is involved as well. You know, and as we move through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we're always trying to help the student become more independent and work on some more tools that work best for them in studying and in organization. So it's always nice to see like a progression and hear about a progression of students as well. And regarding the resource class period, I believe tomorrow you're going to be getting an email, and the next week later it will be time to like determine is your child going to be taking a foreign language class or a resource class. So right now we do ask that you would check the box of a resource period instead of the foreign language. And then as your child's having their transition meetings, it can be determined if your child does qualify for foreign language or not. But if you could check the box for resource period, that's the resource period class, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, that was an email that I sent you that had that little box that shows what to sign up for. Unless you've already had an IEP meeting and they determine that your child is best suited to attend that foreign language, that's great. But if you're still waiting on that meeting or they've already had that with you, that just helps with the scheduling and all that too. It's kind of, when you're describing it all, it kind of reminds me old school, really old school, like a study hall. But it's a study hall that's directed and supported by the special education team, is really what I kind of think of it.
We do a lot of progress monitoring during that class period, so if your student has IEP goals based in math or ELA or just even in executive functioning, we engage with students in progress monitoring during that time. And then again, we know that the IEP is a fluid document, so based on your child's needs, maybe at some point during their middle school years, they might not qualify for a resource period anymore because they've made tremendous gains, which is fantastic. And then I'm not quite sure about South. I'm assuming it's the same as Thomas, but we do have a world language class that sometimes students who move from the resource period class can move into a world language. Occasionally students choose a foreign language, and at our transition meetings we can talk more about that. But when our students take placement, if they're taking a foreign language class here, typically those students still go into the first year foreign language in high school. And I know it causes parents a lot of anxiety. They're like, my student needs to take a foreign language in middle school, they're going to be far behind. And like, I want to make you relax on that one. They won't be far behind. But again, we're basing all of our decisions as a team, you guys are part of the team, based on your students' need, whether or not foreign language or resource period.
I just want to give a special plug for the resource class. I wish we could rename it, and maybe we should consider renaming it, because I would love to call it the Student Success Class. When you take this resource class, especially as a 6th grader, you're really getting a roadmap on how to be a successful middle schooler. How do you navigate the school day? How do you study for classes? How do you study for all 8 of your classes? Pre-teaching, reteaching, all these great things that sometimes we're falling on the shoulders of parents at the elementary level. Those are things that we do during that resource class.
Chunky large projects.
Yep. Like, how do you be a successful student? Those executive functioning skills. So there's so much value. I feel like I almost wish like all 6th graders in a way could take the resource class, because they just learn so much about being a successful student. So I just had to plug it.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yep.
Also, some of those transitions, your 5th graders are transitioning into a lot more gen ed classes. As a 6th grader, that your teams are making those decisions. And those resource classes also support a lot of that content area that's really highly language-based. You know, there's a lot more tests and quizzes in science and social studies, those sorts of things. So having that extra resource class, your child might be in 7 or 8 gen ed classes, you know, without support, but then that resource class gives them the most independence to be able to be in those gen ed classes without that support. So when we think of least restrictive environment, that's also things that we discuss with your 5th grade teams, where maybe they can be independent all day long and they only need this one resource class to be successful in those gen ed settings without another adult. Those sorts of things.
Yeah, can I ask a question before the end? So on the resource class, what does it look like? Is it 10 students? Is it 20 students? I love the idea of pre-teaching or post-teaching, homework, all of those things, but I can only imagine that all of our students are in one class and they all need something. How many students? What does it look like? How does it feel then for those other students that they're looking at their peers that aren't in resource classes, like those kind of things? So can you describe the actual resource class?
So it changes daily and it
Okay.
changes yearly based on needs. So,
Okay.
but it is considered a special education class, so there is a limit, a cap on how many students we can have in there, but they range and it depends anywhere. Some of the classes can be 4 students to probably, I don't know, you say 15 and maybe 17.
But I just want to clarify, are you speaking just about that resource period of the day?
Yep, just the
that
resource class,
Class.
like the one that you described, someone as a study hall, which when you have a high schooler, study hall is very different than, you know.
Yeah,
So
it's a lot
so
more
I don't know if
structured.
that's the best description.
So we do base it on student needs that are in that class. We have a framework that we start with. Obviously, we talk about that in 6th grade. We hit heavy with, you know, there's some kind of assignment notebook checking going through your day and
Okay.
assignments with that. At least it's out. That's what we do. It's obviously similar. And then depending on when we meet with the team of teachers, when there's tests and quizzes coming up, those would be priorities over like we're going to do a study session, those sorts of things.
Okay.
And then they're sprinkled in depending on individual needs. If we need to progress monitor a reading goal for certain people, you know, those are sprinkled in during the day. And then also speech and language and social work will sometimes pull from there too. So we have lots going on, and we don't always have all 16 kids at one time every day. And then a lot of it is homework help, so individual, once we do those initial executive functioning things, cleaning lockers, trappers usually once a week kind of thing,
I was gonna
missing
say that.
assignment, you know, assignments, that sort of thing, and then it depends on, and we always have a shared teaching assistant in there that a lot of times we have grade level teaching, so they're in those science and social studies classes, and then they can also help, they learn what they've done that day with those students, and they're to answer. We as special ed teachers can't be in all those core classes all day long, so we rely on them. They've listened to the lesson, they know what they have done that day to then answer some more of those questions. It also helps, we get feedback in our teams every day we meet with them, so we know who's missing certain assignments or who needs more help with long-term risk. So that's also in there, so there's a lot of individualization that goes in with that. You mentioned also what does it look like compared to other maybe gen ed peers. It's 10 periods, so it is different. I know that the students feel they come to a school, it's coming and going, and it's not just a period throughout the day. We have other students that go to tiered interventions, they go for multi-language. So there are other options for other students that go other places. It's just part of their schedule.
Excellent. Is it, and South, I only know South, like will these resource class periods be with all of the other 6th grade classes? Like that's how South is set up?
It's
then-
mixed in with their schedule, so.
Right, but in that area of the
Yes.
6th, okay, good.
So as they're walking around, there's so many kids going in so many different directions.
But it's still in their same wing, so we're.
Same wing, thank you for the term, yeah, in their wing, they're not going somewhere special, okay, good,
Yeah, it's the same classroom that they would be.
good.
We have a couple more questions here. Sure, go ahead.
I just want to ask, so when you're doing instruction in these classes, is it whole group or are you doing stations?
So again, it depends on the individual class. You know, ELA would look different than math, and it would look different than on, you know, sometimes we have multiple groups going in if we have different teaching assistants with us, and sometimes it might be whole group. That resource class really is more individualized, but again, if we're doing a review for science, it would probably be more whole group, and then we might break off into certain things. Some students don't have that science or social studies class because they might have an extra reading or writing, so a teacher or a shared team might be working with a small group while another group is doing a shared review for science. So a lot goes on there, but it is structured and organized within that. It's a routine. Once we get going, it is a routine with that pattern. Speech and social work typically has a routine and a schedule, so students know when they're going on a certain day, things like that. So it may look chaotic if you were as an observer being in there, but yeah, a lot happens in there. So, and it's funny because a lot of the gen ed peers, they start to ask, how can I get into that class? Why can't I have that?
Absolutely.
Class? So,
Was there another question?
Yeah, I had a question. So is it like in this resource class, is it the same couple of teachers that are in there every day? So like, do you guys monitor like, hey, you're missing an assignment from last week? Like, or do we as parents have to monitor that and email whoever and be like, hey, can you
that's a
help
great question.
Joe on his homework?
As part of the transition process, you're going to have a point person, just like you have a case manager at your building.
Right.
You'll have a special ed case manager at that building as well. Most likely, that same person will be your resource teacher for that class. If not, but you will have that teacher, so that'll be your point person to email. But also you can always, like a science teacher, we always tell them copy the resource teacher as well because we meet in teams, that sort of thing, if you have questions about sort of missing assignments.
Okay.
But yeah, Schoology, Power School, those are gonna be your go-tos too.
Yes,
So if you
yes,
have
I
a
mean,
question
I'm used
about
to like
those,
monitoring that.
yeah, if you have a question.
Trust me, I still use it in high school.
Yeah. But the idea is we're trying to get the students to be more independent, so that's part of our schedule too, is we get them to be more accountable and checking grades during that class, checking missing assignments, things like that.
Quick question. I went to South a long, long time ago. So are you guys still split in wings? And then, so is there two, like a resource teacher on each end, or is it just one resource teacher for the whole sixth grade special education program?
So we have one resource for each team.
Each wing, okay.
And actually this year, our sixth grade was, numbers were higher, so we actually had 3
Okay.
case managers for
Okay.
sixth grade, all in the same area. Actually, if you walk at South, you walk straight down the hallway, you actually walk right into the 2
Yes.
resources. But they're all right there, 6th grade's on the first floor, 7th grade's on the second floor,
Yeah.
8th grade on the third.
Yeah. And then, so the resource, is that gonna kind of piggyback off that? Is that gonna be our go-to, pretty much communicator for, okay,
That'll be your case manager.
Case manager,
Whoever
okay.
your case manager is.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
okay.
And that is something that is different from elementary. Typically, the resource teachers in middle school stay with their grade level. So like some of the elementary schools, you might have had, Mrs. Smith, and you had her for 3 or 4 years in a row as your resource teacher or case manager. That is something that does change at the middle school level.
If your student has social work services, that social worker will follow them for 3 years though,
So that will be the same, okay.
Great, so I think a lot of these general features of our resource support, we kind of went over as we were discussing everything, as you can see. The big takeaway is it's very individualized to your child's needs, and that's why we have those meetings, that's why we talk to you, that's why the teams talk to each other, to really make sure that we have the schedule that best fits your child's needs at middle school, knowing that can always change. They're flexible, they can always make those changes once they get in. We do have some other supports that we want to talk about, our extended resource program.
All right, hi, my name is Annie Swiderski. I'm one of the extended resource program teachers at South. So I'll tell you a little bit about what that program looks like. So it's a small group special education class where it differs from resource, and I think it's the same at Thomas in that there are 2 resource teachers. So what typically happens is the core academic classes, so the language arts, math, social studies, those are taught either by one extended resource teacher or potentially one of the other 2. So there are fewer transitions, and it's a little bit more of a kind of a family atmosphere, which is nice. Science is offered as a general education class, so it's the general education curriculum. Typically, our students that start off in extended resource have a 3rd ELA class in place of that science to kind of get additional support, language, vocabulary support, and extra reading and writing support. And then homeroom and health can be either taught within extended resource or outside, depending on the student's IEP. In extended resource, we also have an alternate curriculum, which is research-based. So it's a little bit more self-paced, it's a slower pace. As Ms. Nabar was saying, sometimes we also do small group or whole class. Kind of depending on the student's needs, and typically there's a shared teaching assistant in there as well. Extended resource, most of the classes are multi-grade level classes, so you might have a mix of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. It depends on the IEPs and the needs of the students. The numbers vary a little bit. They are smaller classes, and the students tend to be sort of at a similar academic level across the board. The students also still participate in the district and state assessments, so your math and your IAR with accommodations. There's also a social skills group offered that targets advocacy, executive functioning, and peer relationships. And then related services like speech therapy and social work, they'll do push in or pull out, again, depending on the needs of the students and the individual IEPs.
And just as Annie described, we have a lot of integration opportunities for the students that are in our ERP or extended resource class. And then we have we did have a little student profile on
Yeah,
there.
for sure.
Yeah.
So the typical profile of a student in ERP, they require monitoring of their IEP goals and are typically 2 to 3 years below grade level. And in terms of what that looks like on the placement page of the IEP, that's typically a student that is in special education for 40 to 50% or more of their day. As I said, the alternate curriculum is modified, it's at a slower pace. Students we kind of have the ability to be more student-centered and go at the pace of the class or even at the individual student pace, depending on teaching assistant support and what's available there. There's multiple opportunities for repetition and reteaching. We benefit from a small group instructional model. Occasionally we'll do whole class, but even our whole class is still within a small group, which is nice to have. There's consistent expectations for behaviors and for academics that are consistently reinforced. As I said, they're kind of in the same environment for a good portion of their day, so it's a little bit, we have the flexibility to be flexible but also be really consistent in our expectations, and we have plenty of opportunities to model, and we kind of use some of the older students to help also be role models in that class as well. The students really do benefit from fewer transitions and throughout their school day. They might require some positive behavior support with student skills, organization, problem solving, advocacy. And they might also need more technology support, such as maybe they use more text-to-speech for writing assignments and other technological needs. We're just able to accommodate that a little bit easier for those students.
We have one other program that we'd like to talk about tonight with Mary Beth.
Stand up so I can see all your faces. Hi, I'm Mary Beth Delaney, and I'm the ILP teacher at South, and there's an ILP teacher at Thomas as well. The ILP class is also, you might be most familiar with self-contained, and it's not exactly self-contained because we're not in the same room all day long. There's lots of integration opportunities, but it is probably the most contained of all the programs that we have at the middle school level. So it's typically for students that are 3 or more years below grade level and who are more globally involved, that they have speech, social work, typically APE often. Some of them have other physical needs as well as academic needs. So we have language arts 3 periods, like Annie said, that they do in ERP. So there's frequently it's 2 reading and a writing, but depending on the needs of the student, sometimes it's 2 writing and a reading. So we can play with that a little bit. And one of those is in place of the science class. And then in place of social studies, we have a life skills class. Now, some students that are in ERP come to ILP for life skills because they might have a higher level ability to read and write, but they don't have a general fund of knowledge. So we work on a lot of things that are unit-based. We're in the midst of resolutions right now and talking about goal setting, but we've done cooking activities. We've done all different things that have to do with so that they can participate in discussions of gen ed peers and with family around the table, things that they hear on the news, things that they read, not in the newspaper anymore, but things that they hear, we want them to be able to participate to the best of their ability. We also work on some leisure skills because a lot of our kids only know how to use technology for leisure, so we want them to be able to be part of a group and work on their friend skills. We incorporate general education students with base buddies, or they come in, we have some clubs where they come in so that they can practice their conversational skills, they can practice, and it's nice to have as many allies in the building as we can. So we truly have some friendships that occur within our classroom, but it's hard for somebody with some significant special needs to have a bunch of true friends in the building, but we can make a whole community of allies. And so that's one of the things that we do. And those allies are really important when our kids are included in their general education classes. They go out every day for creative arts, they go out for lunch, they go out for physical education. So there are many opportunities. They're also included in all our extracurricular and all of our field trips. So even though they're in our class, and they may be in our class for homeroom even, they do have a homeroom that they're paired with for those special activities throughout the year. And everybody in the building knows them. They're really part of the community. They're not off on their own. So we have a very integrated model for our therapists. Our therapists, speech, social work, OT, are in our classroom a lot. We do a lot of push-in therapies. They might run a class, a social skills class or a language class. Our OT runs an OT class where once a week where we might cook, we might do a project, we might work on writing. In the holidays, we worked on rapping. All different kinds of things that are going to serve them well as skills of daily living outside of our classroom. And then we also have, they pull out, and that's one of the main reasons that we need resource classes for those pull-out therapy sessions so that they're not missing academics to do those. So a lot of the students in ILP do not take the IAR test. They'll take the alternative dynamic learning map test. Those that, some of our students take maps because it levels a little bit more easily, and some of our students do not. That's very individualized. We have the ability to have our students be in PE year-round so that they can have, that's more social than some of the other classes, and they really benefit from those movement activities. So we have an alternative health class taught by our social worker that focuses on things a little bit more appropriate for our students. It might be safety, it might be hygiene, it might be personal information. We do a unit on with the Circles curriculum, who's a stranger, who's safe, or who you can trust, touch, talk to. Those types of things instead of body systems. I don't have a whole lot of students who really need to know a lot about their digestive tracts right now. But it's really important that they know who they can ask a question to in a story and who they can't. So we try to focus on things that they're going to use their whole life. Most of our students have assistive technology, either for writing help or for language repair, or actually if they are not speakers, we have a lot of use of touch chat. I was a speech pathologist for a long time first, so that's my kind of my bag of tricks. We have teaching assistants that are consistent throughout the day, and they are in our class with us, but they also go out with our students when they're in those creative arts classes, or we have a couple that go out even for lunch in case there's a problem that needs to be solved, and the students aren't comfortable solving that on their own. I think that's pretty much.
It was great.
Yeah. If you look at our programs, your child is not being placed in any program.
Right.
That's one thing. It is very fluid. We'll have our transition meetings. Students cross programs. They grow out of programs into programs. So it's not a place where your student is going, and nor is it a schedule or locked in. So we do have cross programs based on their needs, but we like to kind of chunk it in these 3 levels so that you kind of understand how we organize them.
Can I very briefly jump back in? I think there was one thing I forgot that I wanted to clarify. So as Mrs. Nabar was saying when she talked about the resource program, an extended resource, students also have a resource homework period where they're able to work on homework, organization, anything that they might need. Again, that's very individualized, but that's also within the extended resource program, and that's in place of foreign language.
And then as we were kind of going down that continuum, we do have the support similar to which we have in elementary school. And so we have one of our speech language pathologists, Megan, here to talk about what that looks like.
Hi, I'm Megan Moser. I am one of the speech language pathologists at South Middle School. There's actually 2 of us at South and 2 of us at Thomas. And we both work with all the students in the resource program and in the extended resource and ILP program. So basically, if your student gets speech and language at the elementary school, that will continue at the middle school. There's kind of that continuum of services for speech and language, just as there is for everything else. So the first one up there is speech only. That would be if that's the only service that your student gets. We typically call it a speech only IEP or speech and language primary. That is typically, or really only pull out, so they'd be pulled from a class. And it's minimal support, so 35 minutes a week, 40 minutes a week, sometimes 60 minutes a week. Just really depends on what is recommended and what they're eligible for. Those goals might be for articulation or for language, but these students don't get any other support. So the speech pathologist is the case manager and is working with that student only. If a student's in the resource program, they could also have speech and language as a related service. And so I know we've been talking a lot about that. When we pull students for that service, it's usually from that resource class. Because we have the 10 classes during the day, the 10 periods. We have to see them during the school day. So when does that happen? We try not to pull them from their academic classes because that's having them miss, reading and writing and math. We don't want them to miss that and stress them out and have them try to catch up. So when I'm pulling students, it's usually from resource. Sometimes it's from lunch, like if they have social language goals and we can get a group together and have a lunch group, we can eat lunch together and work on those social language goals. Other than that, if we're pulling students, try to rotate it so that they're not missing the same thing every week. And that's a big difference from elementary school. I know students are like, I have speech on Tuesdays at 9:30. Well, we switch it. It changes every week typically because we don't want them to miss social studies for one period every week. So one week it might be creative arts, the next week it might be PE, the next week it might be social studies. So we try to go through it, and I know both schools do it differently depending on what works for them. And the students, it's a change, but they do get used to it, and I think they like the flexibility with it because if something's going on in class on Wednesday and they can't come see me, all I ask is say, hey, let me know and we'll reschedule you till tomorrow. And so we have that flexibility to make a new schedule the next day and let them know. We used to give out passes so that they knew when to come, but with the whole school using Schoology, that's something that I started using as well to let them know when they were coming. So it's very discreet. We're not going into their homeroom going, hey, Joe, you have speech today at 9 o'clock, here you go. So it's very on the down low. They're not feeling embarrassed. And with the passing periods, like we said already, everybody's going different places. And they would just kind of come to my room and nobody knows the difference. So that's kind of how it works for the pull-out program. For extended resource and ILP, it's very collaborative. It's very working together with the teachers. There's some push-in services. There is some pull-out services depending on the goals and the minutes. But it really just depends on the needs, what their goals are, and how they are addressing those goals. But even in the resource program, it is very collaborative. We're talking with the resource teachers. We touch base with the teams, find out when, how students are doing, if they're struggling, if they need to work on something. And we also work together with the teachers with those language goals. A lot of it is, working on that science vocabulary, working on that social studies vocabulary, checking in with them to make sure they understood what was happening in those classes because it is so language based and they need that extra support.
Thanks, Megan. Sure. We just have Jeff here to talk a little bit more about some of our other additional support that are available.
So I'm Jeff Butsy, I'm a social worker, and I work at South Middle School. Right now I have the 8th grade, and we kind of loop with the kids, so next year I'll move back down to the 6th grade and then follow them through the rest of the grades. A lot of what Megan said kind of works for me too. We try not to pull kids from their academic class, try to pull them from the resource class, so again, they're not missing a lot of academics. Most of the kids that I see tend to be in the lunch group, and that's with students that have an IEP, but it's also with regular education students too. So, now, the ILP and the ERP program, they have their own social worker, so that person kind of follows them around their entire time they're there too. So, let's see. In addition to social work, we have a behavior specialist, we have occupational physical therapists, and adaptive physical education services too. So, on occasion we have students that may have a vision or a hearing impairment, and we work with NSSEO to give them some services too.
And again, all those related services will be on your IEP. So when you're having that transition meeting, it'll list out all of that, and the team can talk about what that service delivery is.
All right, so we talked a lot about what you might see on your child's IEP and some of these specific services. The next couple slides are some more general education services that we offer up to all of our students. So we utilize a system of support called MTSS, and that's the multi-tiered system of support. Some of you might know these classes as RTI classes, And basically any student, general education, or student with an IEP, but not a goal area in this specific way, but still a student who doesn't have a reading goal but needs reading help, they can qualify for a reading intervention class or a math intervention class. We do also offer up behavior intervention supports, executive functioning intervention supports, but we utilize that multi-tiered system of supports. And then at the middle school level, every quarter, we're looking at the student's data to see if we need to graduate the student out of that intervention class, or if they're students that qualify to go into that intervention class. But these MTSS classes, these intervention classes are very fluid and it could change from time to time. But again, you wouldn't necessarily have an RTI MTSS class for a goal area that your student has. That's why we have the different levels of IEP support. In addition, we offer up some lunch support depending on a student's needs. We do work with general education students to be lunch buddies with other students. It really just depends. We can have a teacher assistant that works in the lunchroom with students as well. But we recognize that our lunch setting is very large, it can be overwhelming. We can also offer up specific placement within the lunchroom. Here at Thomas, we have some students that dine just outside of the lunchroom. They can see us, but they're just outside, it's a little quieter. It really just depends, but we do offer up a lot of support, especially when it comes to open seating in the lunchroom. We'll definitely help your kids out and make sure that they have some friends to sit with. I know at Thomas, when it comes to the lunchroom, for sixth grade especially, we start off in homeroom seating. So that way they at least know where their home-based student is. They've got those 12, 20 other kids in their homeroom that they have to sit with those first couple weeks of school. So that's kind of nice for them to get acclimated to the lunchroom itself.
Yeah, they need to learn how to get through the lunch lines and navigate all of the cleanup and everything. And so it's easier just to have them set, within the home base, and then we give them the opportunity to choose groups to sit with.
So the lunchtime is very exciting, and we look forward to telling you more about it when you come to the presentations that we're hosting later in the year, because that is a big deal when we're transitioning over. We have hot lunches, choices, we have ice cream. It's a big deal. The kids love it. It's a big staff. There's another part of the middle school piece that we offer up, which is really exciting. So between both buildings, we have an extreme amount and a crazy awesome amount of extracurricular activities. It is so important to us that your students don't just come here for the academics. We want them to get involved in at least one other thing. We want them to find something that they're passionate about, something that they enjoy, something that they can get to know their peers in a different way. So we offer up a variety of clubs and sports where they can try out for different sports. All students, doesn't matter if you have an IEP or not, all students are eligible to try out for any of the competitive sports. But sports like cross country, which actually starts in early August before school starts, any student can participate in cross country. And it's kind of nice because it gets them ready for the school year. In early August, they have to get up early in the morning and they have to come over here to school and start running. I know it sounds awful, but they really do love it. It's a great way to get to know some of their peers and get acclimated to the middle school. So all students, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade can participate in cross country. There's no cuts. We'll start off with 150 kids, and then the hot weather hits, and we might lose a few. But it really is fun for the kids. The other sport that all students can do 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, both genders, is wrestling. So that's a winter sport, but anyone can participate in wrestling, and that's just another fun one. A lot of students do that just for their camaraderie, which is really great.
And students create their own clubs. Like we have Exploding Kitten Club, Lego Club, like the card game. Exploding Kitten.
Oh, okay. We've had a horseback riding club. We've never been horseback riding, but we've talked about it in clubs. So, it's really based on if a student has a club idea and they can get a teacher to sponsor it, we can fund it and provide the activity. So students learn a lot about clubs through the daily announcements. Every morning, they'll tell you what club is meeting when. But there really is a little something for everyone.
Fingernail polishing club. I did go to that once. And I'm not kidding you. We had that.
Super fun.
So, one thing, between now and the end of the year, if you have an opportunity to attend a basketball game, a volleyball game, a track meet in the spring, if you come to the musical, anything that you can do to pair the middle school with a positive experience for your child, it would be really beneficial. So if you could get them to come and visit with you and be, have a fun evening, that would be great. I would recommend that.
What a great suggestion. At both buildings, we put on extraordinary plays and musicals. So every spring, and they're student directed. There might be 60 kids that are involved, maybe only 10 are on stage, but everyone else is working behind the stage. They're working the sound, they're working the stage crew. It's a great experience. There's a lot of camaraderie there amongst the students. So that's another amazing opportunity that kids in District 25 have, is through our performance clubs and drama, musicals and plays and such. Okay, there's a little bit more. This next slide I think is really probably like our most important slide of the night. We cannot stress this enough. Yeah. Extracurricular.
So all those activities are after school?
They're all after school. Sometimes you might find one at lunch, it depends. But we should mention this too. They are all free of cost. Any student can participate in the club, and while they sign up so that they can get the information, they're not locked in. So like if I can't make it to ski club this week, I can still go next week. You don't have to guarantee your participation. They're all free. Kids can stay after school. Sometimes at lunch, you might find a club that might be meeting in the morning. It really would depend, but mostly after school. And then both buildings offer up an activity bus for students who are bus riders. All of our clubs end in time for the activity bus at 3:30. So if your student's a bus rider, they would stay after school and go to the club and then take the bus at 3:30.
So the last activity is 3:30?
Yeah, of the clubs. If your child participates in a sport, cross country or wrestling, that practice may go till 5 o'clock, in which case you'd have to provide transportation home.
Oh, okay. So where can we get this information about these activities?
So the activities, they'll be through our announcements, and you can actually go into our announcements on the website every day. So for South, go to our web page, and you'll see the morning announcements. We also have an area where we actually keep a listing of all our clubs and activities and when they occur.
The clubs change every year. The clubs change every year. Some stay the same, but some are unique depending on what the students generate ideas-wise.
So it can be like, you can do every day, right?
Yeah.
Like different activities.
Yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for sure. It depends on Mondays, but you just want to be watching the announcements, and even like we put all of our clubs on the school calendar as well. So that way you can always look on the calendar and see what's going on that day. That's all on our website.
Dr. Morrison, cross-country stuff would come out in the summer then too.
Yes.
Yeah, that information will come out this summer.
Yeah, that cross-country is early August before school starts. So you'll get more information on that.
You have to sign up before the school starts, right?
For cross-country, we would encourage that because they do a lot of...
For any other?
Oh, no, the clubs are absolutely drop-in.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we'll talk more about the clubs and extracurriculars at our event that's coming up. So come to that one for more information. But this next slide is one of our last slides here, and we just wanted to really emphasize that it's a really important parent-school community partnership that we'd like to develop with you. Together, all of us together, you're an important part of that meeting. We're going to determine the most appropriate level of support to meet your child's needs so that they're successful in 6th grade. We might start off the year based on a plan that we make this, March, April, and then we realize September, October that we need to make an adjustment in your child's plan, and that's perfectly appropriate. At the middle school level, every quarter, we kind of hit the reset button with the classes, so there's a lot of room for flexibility there. Please understand the important role that you play in helping us best meet the needs of your child. Together, we'll revise that plan, as I just mentioned. Together, we're going to ensure that there's a smooth transition for your child. If you have a child that is really feeling nervous and anxious about middle school, please reach out to us. We can give individualized tours if needed. We're here all summer, lucky us. 12-month employees over here, so we're in the building. If you want to come in over the summer, just reach out to us and we can make arrangements. It's so important to us, number one, that you feel comfortable, because how you feel about middle school, your child's going to feel that from you. They're gonna sense your level of comfort. They're gonna sense, even if you're scared, I would hope that you would come home tonight and tell them all the exciting things that you learned about, because they're gonna feel that from you and they're gonna build off of that. So We want you to be comfortable. We really want your child to be comfortable and excited about middle school because it is a big change. But I promise you, like every year, they learn it and they do it. And you know, like Jim said, within 7 days, they're giving directions to other people. They really are. It's very fun.
Reminding us sometimes.
So your next steps. One, you need to register. Once you get registered and things start moving forward, there'll be a transition meeting with both elementary and with some of the middle school representatives. Please note that the representative that's coming there may not be the case manager of your child, but they work so close together. Really, you know, that's not a big concern on our end. One of the things you need to also remember or know about is that the minutes will reflect what is going to happen at the middle school. Because our schedule is set by 40-minute periods, where at the elementary it's all, you know, it could be 20 minutes or 10 minutes or 30 minutes. Ours are all set to 40 minutes. So just know that there could be some slight changes in minutes wise. And then our case managers will be communicating with you before the school year begins, and getting some information from you, having some conversations as we go along. So we're very excited. We're very excited. I mean, this is our kickoff. I know it's, you know, January, but we're already started looking at next year. We're already in that planning process, and it gets us excited about the coming school year and having your kids here. And your kids will see us. We'll be in the buildings, we'll be in the feeder schools, talking to kids. They'll come over to see us, you know, and walk the building at times during the school day, towards the end of the school year. So they'll have plenty of opportunities to come and see us, and hopefully that helps with that transition period to be a lot smoother, and that's our goal. That's our goal, is a smooth transition.
We're very fortunate because we are extremely proud of the programs that we have here in District 25. We're super rich in resources, and we have amazing personnel. We truly do. Our students leave here, as some of the parents that I have mentioned, and they go off to do really, really great things. The goal is for them to meet their goals and help remove some of that support as they go through the process. So this is a really exciting time. We could talk all night about this because we're so passionate about it. But you're in great hands, and we do look forward to working with you.
So thank you guys for coming. I will share out this presentation to everyone on that email list that I originally sent. We'll also have the video to go to in case there was some other conversation that you want to see. But if you have questions, reach out. I put the admin contact and the student services coordinator's contact on there, and you'll have that. So reach out. You will be meeting us multiple times throughout this transition. But if you have questions, we want you to feel reassured and comfortable too. So definitely let us know. Any general questions?
Sure. I think there's a question about transportation. Yes. When do you receive the transportation information, or?
Yeah, how it works? It's like in a blended school bus, or it's like just for special education bus? How it works?
Great question. Yeah. So almost all of our students take the general education school buses. There are some cases in which some students do come via taxi. It really just depends. That would be a very specific situation, maybe based on a particular need. But gosh, we run about 13 school buses to and from school every day. And then I think maybe overall we have about 5 kids that are transported via taxi.
Okay. Yeah. So that would be another great question to have at your child IEP meeting, where the team can talk about that and make those decisions. Okay.
I have a question more geared towards buses. My daughter's a busser, and she's panicking because she is afraid that she won't know what bus to get on. So, I mean, it's different than the elementary where like there's only 3-4 buses, like they really, and they have teachers that will help them. So do they have
There's
people there that will direct them as to what bus to get on?
On a regular day, there's several people out there. Actually, you'll probably see me and our assistants out there as well. But that first week of school, first few days, there's most of the 6th grade teachers are out there that are special education teachers.
I mean, I know their routes are on their passes, but.
And their routes are posted in the bus windows.
Yes.
Truly, like having done this now for 7 years, like they get the hang of it. The
Okay.
students really see the routine of it, and they recognize their bus drivers, and it takes us, we can load and get our buses out of here within 7 minutes.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm familiar, trust me,
Yeah.
I've got
Yeah.
a high schooler, so I know what it's like for busing, but, you know,
And
it's
you'll find
different
some
having
friends
a
that are on
kid
the
that's
bus.
has panic attacks, like, you know.
Yeah. No, the busing part really is seamless.
Okay.
I feel like the kids jump into routine on it.
Well, thank you all for coming.